Welcome to another episode of the All Tens Podcast. I'm your co-host, Josh West. With me, as always, Clay Harrison. Today, Clay, we're continuing our Outside the Guide series on a topic many of our clients face, and it's we got to fill the top of that funnel. What do you got?
Oh, none of my clients want to worry about filling the top of the funnel, Josh. I don't know what you're talking about. Everybody has more sales than they can handle. What are you talking about?
I'll just bet they do.
If you're driving in your car right now and that is actually your response to top of the funnel, like, I don't even know. I don't have to worry about that. Like, you can skip. Like, congratulations, you've won a pretty big part of the work that you're here to do as a business leader. But kidding aside, almost all of my clients are trying to figure out how to get more leads, get more proposals out the door, get more clients, paying them every month. So, yeah, man, top of the funnel activity is legit.
This episode of the All Tens Podcast is powered by Streti, the EOS software people love. With EOS Pure Tools, plus additional collaboration and communication tools, you can run on EOS and execute on daily work all in one place. Learn more at Streti.com. That's STRETY.com.
So, where do you want to start?
Well, there's plenty of places that we can start, but I'm going to start with one that's near and dear to our hearts, Clay. If you've got customers, pick up the phone.
What? You don't even need the first phrase. Pick up the phone. Pick up, like, whether you have customers or not. If you don't have customers, it might even be more important to pick up the phone.
But when we want information about how to communicate with further prospects, and I'll tell you, Clay, I worked with someone one time that when that topic came up, they said, oh, absolutely not. Don't bother calling them, right? They don't know what they want. And it was, I'll use the word arrogant. And I think maybe people have heard that old Henry Ford line one too many times, where if I'd asked the world what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. I think also Steve Jobs, he just walks on stage like, we show people what they want. And okay, if you've got that much money and that much of an army behind you, and you are truly innovating in the world, then great, do that. But if you're not Henry Ford or you're not Steve Jobs, please pick up the phone and call your customers and talk to them and learn something from them today.
I just want our listeners to know that before we record podcasts, we kind of check in with each other, and Josh has had himself a day. So there's a little bit of an edge. And I love it. Anyway, okay. I'm going to say yes and on that. All right. Because I think that oversimplifies, and I agree with you. Like, there's not many Steve Jobs or Henry Fords in the world, right? Like, there's a reason why we know their names, and it's not because they were just like your neighbor, right? I mean, if they were your neighbor, that's also cool. But instead of, part of me wants to disagree with you. Part of me wants to say yes and, because I'm in a more conciliatory mood today. But I'm going to say yes and because I think that's actually conflating two things. One of them is talking about what you're selling, where it fits in the market, like whether or not you're providing like some marginal or additive value, right? And I think that's an important thing to think about. And you sometimes have to like think about things in a different way, set new paradigms, that kind of stuff. But I'm going to put that to the side because I think what that Steve Jobs or like the Wayne Gretzky, like, because you got to skate to where the puck is going, like that sort of thing. That those are all in that category of you need to be creative. You can't just you can't let the world tell you what to do. You have to actually have an input and impact and a perspective and all those sorts of things. And I think that is valuable. That's not the same thing as understanding why people want to buy from you. Those are two separate things. So when I hear you say that so directly, what I want to say is, I think that those things, if the world would just ask for faster horses, and I think that's probably true. So you maybe don't listen to them on exactly what to provide, but what they're telling you is that they want to get to their destination faster, right? And so when you pick up the phone and talk to client, because you should be listening to the people who already love you about why they love you and all those sorts of things. When you do that, they're gonna give you very specific like product ideas, or you know what I wish would be different? I wish that when your guy showed up, he'd show up in a brown car instead of a black car or whatever. And the point of the conversation is not to just listen to that and then do everything that they say. The point is to pick up the phone, have those conversations, to understand what is the thing that's resonating with them, that's motivating them, that is the common thread between them and everybody else. And that was probably the color of the car example is a really bad example, but you're listening for context, not for like specific explicit ideas. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a little nuanced.
Indeed. And, also part of it is just as simple as what are the words that they use and how do they talk about your product or service? Because certainly we get, even in EOS, right? Like, we've got lots of words, we've got lots of acronyms and jargon and things like that just become second nature to us. But that's not how the people who need us talk about it out there in the world. And when we talk about filling the top of the funnel, part of that is your marketing, your messaging, and it's much more powerful to talk to them in the language that they use and using those words and phrases and talking about their challenges and what they like in the way that they do and not necessarily in the way that you think they should. In times that I've spent in and with marketing leadership, some of the best, most clever things that we ever came up with or wrote hit the editing room floor because only we really understood it, or we were in on the joke, but it wasn't appropriate for the rest of the world, and it wasn't what needed to be said to them.
Can I tell you a funny example of that?
Go ahead.
So our listeners know by now, I ran an IT company for forever. And I think October is like data backup awareness month. Whatever, everybody has a month. But so this is probably 12 years ago, 13 years ago. But the marketing person on our team, we were kind of like the same age, grew up listening to the same music. Like, we just kind of had a lot of fun being creative. But for a month we ran an ad on LinkedIn that just said back that thing up. And we thought it was hilarious. Like, I still think it's hilarious, obviously, but it wasn't a really good performing ad. Let's just say, like, to illustrate your point, like, it was funny to us, but it probably should have been on the floor. Anyway, so I want to move on from this, but the point is that product matters. Like, the product or service that you're selling matters, but the thing that even matters more in the context of this conversation, which is getting leads in the door, is getting to a deeper understanding of why people would want to work with you. And in order to understand why, you have to understand what's important to them, what they care about, what problem they're trying to solve. And the last thing I'll do before I ask us to move on is that is not a constant. There's so many things flowing in the world. Just think, in the past 5 years, what has changed? Everything in the world, it feels like, right? And so this isn't like you do it once and you got it figured out. This is kind of a constant thing that's got to be going on in your business, of understanding how the market might be shifting, sometimes in big, sometimes in subtle ways, to figure out how the message that you're putting out in the world will most effectively land. It's a dynamic thing. It is not a set it once and forget it type thing. You've got to be paying attention to what your clients care about and the problems that they're trying to solve. And that's dynamic. Anyway, so let's say we've nailed that, right, Josh? Where did you want to go next after that? Because that's a great place to start.
I think from there, and when we're talking about filling the funnel, we can talk about that in terms of the marketing side and the outbound sales side. So first, maybe it's natural for us to get onto the marketing side of things. And we've had multiple guests on the show that have covered this before, so we can cover it very quickly. But please make sure that you are measuring all of the things that you're testing. And, I'll come back to what you just said a moment ago. In the back that thing up example during National Backup Month, and I said, hey, some of the most clever things, hit the editing room floor. I'm glad you put it out there in the world, because let's be creative. You never know what's going to hit. But to the extent that we are running experiments, measuring and paying attention, and the market will tell us that it didn't work. And when we get to statistical significance, the losers get eliminated, the winners are rewarded, and the tests continue. And that should never stop. And, I think it's very important that we've got very accurate data that we're looking at on a regular basis to evaluate what's really truly working and following that through the funnel. I'll also just earmark here that we could be measuring an action at the very top. And let's say I'll still use your ad as an example. Let's say it got a lot of people to look at your site because they thought it was funny and they clicked on it. But ultimately, none of those people turned into a real qualified lead. You need to understand that aspect of it. And it's not just the eyeballs or the clicks that it got, but did it truly precipitate the outcome that we wanted? And was it a quality lead that turned into business? And that's what I mean when I say we're truly measuring and making sure that we get the right people in that quality.
Yeah. I mean, I another caveat for our listeners, Josh has a marketing background. So like Josh has like a bunch, like my guest Josh would be like, in some of your professional experience, you've done this for pretty big companies, right? Josh is nodding. Yeah. So I want people to listen for the nugget in that, not the prescription, which is like, like I would imagine, because this is true of most of my clients, is that there's like 1 or 2 people doing sales in the organization, not like 200 or 300. And so when you start talking about throwing a lot of like analytics on top of it, it just feels a little overwhelming in a way that becomes paralyzing. So what I want our listeners to hear in that is like, there's probably 1 or 2 things, and you judge their magnitude, both based on impact, dollars spent, like the amount of hope you're putting into something. Like measure a couple things, not all the things, right? And so the way that I did it for years is for every closed deal, I just wanted to know the source. Like we could spend hours and hours and days and months tracking every little thing. The only thing that I cared about really at the very beginning was like, what was our first contact with this deal? Was it a web form? Was it an outbound tactic? Was it a referral? Was it a friend of mine? Like what was the original contact to know where to like press on the gas or not on a closed deal? For sure, I probably could have done some. There's a gazillion things to measure, but anyway, I think that's a good idea. Let's switch over. Let's assume the messaging is out in the world. We're being smart about how we're spending the time and resources on the marketing spend. And to be blunt, a lot of my clients don't even do that much marketing. They're really just doing a lot of outbound. I don't know if that's true for you too, but like they're not huge marketing budgets, right? And most of these are B2B service-based businesses. The trick is in the outbound, and I'm gonna, man, I feel like a hammer looking for a nail because I'm going to bring some EOS tools into it. But there's a ton of tactics that you can employ to do outbound sales. And I'm just going to share my experiences. At my IT company, when we first started, we were dialing for dollars. Like literally, we were all trying to make 100 phone calls a day, just doing that into the world. And there's 7 or 8 of us. People were incentive comp only. Those salaries, every appointment you book, you get $50 or whatever, like real bullpen style sales. And I am a believer that you have to be active in the market to get people to come by you. Now, to buy your stuff. Now, the world has changed from 2001. People don't answer their phones as much and all those sorts of things. But I never changed my belief that you need to be making noise in your target market with activity. And that's changed from phone calls to emails to SMS to LinkedIn messaging, all those sorts of things. I still have a pretty hardcore belief that to fill the top of the funnel, your target market needs to know you exist and you're just trying to figure out the balance between annoying, definitely not breaking the law, annoying and hitting them at the right time. Is that kind of where you're at too when it comes to like thinking about our small business kind of entrepreneurial led clients? Are you with me on that, or are we in a different place?
Absolutely. And you said it. It's about timing.
Yeah.
And when I think about some of my clients, particularly service providers, and if it's B2B, and typically if the service that they're providing, let's say it's an HVAC company, they're working with commercial properties, and they have an annual contract with that HVAC company. So you can easily do the math there, where the chances are the first interaction that they're going to have with you, they're under contract right now.
Right.
And on average, they're 6 months into it. Maybe they just renewed and they are a month or two into this new contract. It's not going to be up for renewal for 10 months. Maybe you're getting to them and the renewal is coming up in 3 months' time. The point that I'm getting at is that it is very likely that the first interaction that you have with someone, they are not in a buying window whatsoever. And thus, if everyone's operating off of this mentality of, I've got to have something right now, and why aren't we getting the results that we want? What happened with this prospect or that prospect? It's not even necessarily that anyone on your team is doing anything wrong. You just have unrealistic expectations because you're not understanding where they're at in their process. And so as you talk about them needing to know that you exist, absolutely. And you need to continue to nurture that relationship so that when the buying window inevitably does reopen, are they going to think of you and are you going to be there at that time?
Yeah.
So
right. That's right. I don't think that we have any control. I don't know that there's any trick that I know of where you can do something so compelling that when the timing is right, they think of you first. I think that's where the consistency comes in. The consistency and execution comes in. If they're target market and they haven't told you to leave you alone, you just got to be there at the right cadence. Be there at the right cadence. Now, this is where we kind of get into like, in what way, right? Like, because this is where there can be, if you're just calling them like every 2 months and be like, hey, you want a meeting? Want a meeting now? Want a meeting now? This is where the kind of some creativity can come into the world, right? Where it's kind of like, I might want to be, those contacts can look differently. And so as we matured our outbound at the IT company, sometimes it was, hey, just want to get on the call and learn a little bit more about you. Sometimes it was, hey, this new thing is happening in the world and we have a perspective on it that we want to share. Sometimes it was, hey, we're hosting an event for the people that we love and the people that we hope to love one day, right? Would you like to come hit a golf ball with us? Like, including that kind of like variability in the offer I'm going to take a quick tangent. Sometimes when I talk to leaders of entrepreneurial companies, most of whom are founders, most of whom who have this like weird, quirky gift of being compelling, being credible, having expertise. And they're like, I don't know, I hired a sales guy and he's not closing any deals. That seems like I'm the only one who can close deals. Right? And it's like, yeah, because you're fucking omnipotent and know everything. You know every problem because you've solved every problem. The sales guy is a idiot who used to sell like, something cool. and like you expect him to close and do exactly like you, but when he shows up in the room, he's not you. So that was true in my business too. So like a lot of times I'm crossing streams here, but two points I want to make. That charismatic expertise leader kind of has a way of just making the outcome happen that he can't really put his finger on, because when he shows up, people just want to do what he says. When a salesperson shows up, they don't have that power. And so two things have to happen. One, you have to make sure that you're not trying to hire someone who's going to do exactly like you, which requires you to create real clarity around that role when you say you're hiring a salesperson. Because one option is to try to find another you who can show up Maybe it's the guy with the gray hair who's been around the block a few times, and maybe you can get close. But more often than not, what you're trying to do is find someone who can just bring people closer to your orbit. Identify the right thing that the next hire is going to do, so that they're closing the next event, not trying to close the whole deal all at once. Right? I think I'm having like verbal diarrhea here. But the point of that was, when you're doing that work, you've got to keep in mind that the point of that outbound work is to close the next thing, not close the entire deal. So when I was saying there's like some variability in the ask, sometimes the ask is, hey, spend 15 minutes with Clay. Sometimes the ask is, hey, come hit golf balls with us. I'm not also putting in there, and here's what it would be like to work with us. I'm just saying, book 15 minutes, show up to an event, because when I do that, then I can close the next event. Sales is just a series of closing the next thing, not eating the elephant. You know what I'm saying?
100%, Clay. And I think that point is well made and well heard. Nurturing the relationship along and breaking it down, and understanding that you're just trying to close the next step and not the whole thing is really great advice for our listeners. I'll end my portion of the episode and throw out for my nugget. If you haven't read Donald Miller's Building a Story Brand, I highly recommend that. It's a great book, and particularly when he talks about understanding your prospect's problem. That problem comes in 3 phases. Your prospect has, in the way that they view their problem, an external aspect of that, an internal aspect of that, and a philosophical aspect of that. And a lot of times we focus on only the external problem that they have and don't dive deep enough into what's really going on internally there, what they feel about that, and also philosophically how they view the world and how the solution should fix that, like how things simply should be. I encourage our listeners to check that out, because there's a lot of great information in there, but specifically when we talk about why someone buys from you and truly understanding their problem, not in necessarily the way that you see it, but in the way that they see it and understand it, I think is critical. What do you got, Clay?
Well, man, I have so much to talk about on this. So I think we're going to do 2 things here to wrap up. One, we talked about understanding that stuff as being dynamic, right? It's going to change over time. You got to constantly be thinking about that. But I also want people to think that that's happening everywhere. That flows, that dynamism flows through the sales process, right? I encourage people to think of their outbound efforts as little tiny experiments that we're doing over and over again. What works this quarter might not work next quarter. It might be a small tweak. It might be a big tweak. But you got to really be paying attention, because you can spend a lot of money on top of the funnel and lose a lot of money real quick. So I want you to be on top of it. We had a guest on a previous episode, Benji Hughes, who talked about, man, if you're going to spend $1, spend it on conversion, not on top of the funnel. So I think that's an interesting kind of just thing to remember. Go back and listen to that episode with Benji. That was a great episode. But top of the funnel is just a bunch of little experiments, capitalizing, striking when the iron's hot, and stopping striking when it cools down. Like, that's one thing. Just think of it as a bunch of little experiments. The second thing is, in terms of closing, and remember, when I say closing, I'm talking about closing the next event, closing the next meeting, closing the commitment to review the proposal. Closing is about personal interaction, not reading an email, not doing something digitally. When I say close the next event, close the thing where you and I, humans, are going to interact. And take that fully. When we say, all right, I'll follow up in 2 weeks, fuck that. Hey, let's schedule our follow-up in 2 weeks. Close that way. Close with specificity. You got to ask. I think that's my last point, is that you got to actually ask for what you want, not hope that it will happen. So when you're trying to do the next thing, whatever that is, get a meeting, get the signature, you got to actually ask for it, not say, all right, when should I follow up? That's the weakest sales shit in the world. When should I follow up is a bullshit question, and you should stop asking it. in my practice, I don't say, hey, and Josh, we talked about this a lot, and it's a work in progress, to be clear. But at the end of a sales presentation to a client, I don't say, hey, should we follow up next week? I say, hey, when do you guys want to get it on the calendar? And I force them to tell me the answer to that, because it's way more awkward to say, I don't think so, to that question than it is to say, yeah, follow up with me in a week. Cool. Fuck that. So done with follow up bullshit. Anyway, sorry. Man, I'm coming in raw. Anyway, so like, just ask. Ask for what you want. Don't ask for permission to ask for what you want maybe in a week. Ask for what you want, and it's always a little bit of an experiment. Those are my 2 points. Anyway, man, this is a little bit all over the place. I don't know. But we talked a lot of top of the funnel stuff. I feel like we gave people some good nuggets. I hope.
There's something in there.
Yeah, it's a bit of a what is that thing where you see what you want to see out of it? Anyway, well, cool. Well, guys, thank you, and gals, thank you for listening to our podcast. That's gonna do it for today's episode. My name is Clay. His name is Josh. We're EOS Implementers, and we love helping entrepreneurs build great businesses. We're so happy you're listening to us on the All Tens podcast. Our request is that you go in and subscribe on your podcast player. You can watch us on YouTube if you're really feeling crazy. But wherever you listen to podcasts, please just subscribe. It really helps us to helps our egos watch the audience grow over time. But that's the episode for today. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.